Ark Survival Evolved, developed by Studio Wildcard in 2015, is very well known for its creatures and emphasis on taming dinosaurs. But in today's video, I'm going to share with you the best Ark harvesters. And just before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe as it really helps the channel. And in at number 5 is the Pteranodon. Now this may be controversial to you, but I really think it does deserve to be on this list, as in the early game these things are great for doing metal runs. Yes, in the late game these aren't going to stack up to something like an Argy or a Quetzal, but in the early game these things are a great way of getting metal without getting yourself killed. Just remember, when you are actually leveling your Pteranodon to do metal runs, mainly level weight. Stamina doesn't matter as much, but you really are going to need to level a lot of weight and probably tame a high level Pteranodon to begin with, because if you don't, then you're just going to end up with no metal at the end of it, and you're just going to be wasting time doing so many trips for getting metal. But once you do have yourself a high level Pteranodon, they can even be great into the mid game as well for doing metal runs, and they are also quite great for doing cave runs as well, as it is a safe way of getting you across the map relatively easily. The only thing really is about the Pteranodon is its saddle can be a bit of a pain to get, because all that chitin or keratin is actually quite a grind if you're playing on official settings. But after that, you have a reasonably good harvester of meat as well if you did want to do that. This thing can actually kill quite a lot of things, and you probably shouldn't underestimate its melee damage. But I would mainly use it for doing metal runs in the early game, like I said, as it will just get you to the top of mountains quite easily, and you're not going to get yourself killed on everything that actually lies on the side of a mountain. I'm mainly looking at things like Sabertooths, Carnos, Rexes, and also Argies as well. So tame a Pteranodon. In at number 4 is the Carcharodontosaurus. Now, to be honest, it is probably pretty obvious why this thing is on the list. It is a great harvester of anything that you will get from killing creatures, as this thing is an absolute machine for that. And the reason why I would put it above where the Giga would be is because it actually does have a reasonable stamina stat and a reasonable amount of mobility. So this thing isn't an absolute pain to use. But once you do have one of these things tamed, you don't even really need a high level, as all of them are going to do insane damage to pretty much any creature. You have a beast where you can just plow through so many creatures with absolute ease, and you're going to be getting so much hide, so much meat, so much prime meat, and if you're killing sheep with this thing, you're going to be getting a lot of mutton as well. Also, on top of that, these things are just really fun creatures as well, and they actually make harvesting not really a chore anymore. It is definitely very fun to destroy absolutely everything in the area with one of these things. You feel like you have so much power, which in the early game of Ark you really don't have a lot of. So it is definitely worth getting one of these for harvesting, as you're actually going to be harvesting for longer than you normally would, because you wouldn't get bored, because these things are simply so fun to ride on. Also, on top of that, once you killed a couple of creatures, they do more damage than the Giga. In at number 3 is the Therii. Now, to be honest, this is probably the best herbivore for doing any kind of berry, fiber, wood or thatch harvesting, as this is great at harvesting them all. And if you wanted, you can even harvest a bit of meat and hide with this thing, as it is very capable of killing creatures, and unlike other herbivores, it is actually able to harvest dead creatures as well. But I would mainly use this thing for harvesting fiber, as I find that I run out of fiber a lot, and this is a lot better than something like a moss chops for harvesting fiber. A moss chops is a great solution in the early game, but when you're later on or in the mid game, a Therii is a great choice as well, as you're going to get yourself a lot of fiber in really not a lot of time with this thing. And also on top of that, it is great at gathering wood and thatch as well, which are definitely essential resources, and you're going to be running through a lot of those in your Ark journey. probably even hundreds of thousands of them if you do play for a couple hundred hours. But the theory still does actually have a major downside if you're going to put this thing into combat. The thing is with carnivores is you can just feed them meat and they heal very quickly. But with the theory, sadly you cannot do that, and you will need sweet vegetable cake if you want to heal it fast, and that is very expensive. In at number 2 is the RG. Now you probably know why this thing is on the list. This is an insane harvester of metal. Obviously it's not going to harvest metal by itself, but it's a great way of transporting you up to where you can harvest metal, and it also can carry a lot of metal back, as it does have weight reduction on things like metal, crystal and obsidian. And also on top of that, its saddle actually acts as a portable smithy, so you can even craft some additional metal weapons if the ones you're harvesting with break. And obviously you can use an Anki as well. As an RG you can pick up an Anki, and if you do have a tamed Anki and you get your RG to pick it up, when you hover it above metal nodes, it will actually harvest the metal nodes for you. And when I use this method, I actually end up harvesting for longer, as it is just really enjoyable for me to do this. And on top of that, it is very convenient as well. The Anki will keep harvesting metal until it has around 70% weight, and then after that you will have to do it manually. Also, if you did want to in a pinch, the RG is a reasonable harvester of meat as well, and when it does eat a dead body it will heal incredibly quickly, so it is actually a good aerial combat creature. And finally, in at number 1 is the Mantis. Now, out of pretty much every harvesting creature in Ark, this is the creature that I always come back to, as it is just simply so useful for so many things. The main ability you're going to be using with the Mantis when you're harvesting is the ability that it has, that it can basically wield any melee weapon. Swords, pickaxes, hatchets and pikes. Literally basically whatever you want to do any kind of harvesting. I'm showing you here the Mantis with swords, partly just because it looks good for the camera, but also just because it is a really great harvester of meat, as you can kill creatures very quickly with this. Also, on top of that, on Raasclark, I do tend to harvest quite a lot of mutton using swords and a Mantis, as it is a great quick way of getting mutton without having to take out the Carcharodontosaurus to really get the job done. But also on top of that, you can use picks if you wanted to do some metal harvesting, and you can use hatchets if you're going to want to harvest wood or thatch or any kind of those resources. But also on top of that, it is just really fun to use, like most other harvesters that I have put on this list, so it makes harvesting a really enjoyable thing, and it is just something that you will continuously do every single time you hop on Ark and look forward to. But the one main downside is it will absolutely tank the weapon's durability. The 5 best travel mounts for Ark. In at number 5 is the Baryonyx. Now you may think this actually isn't a great traveling creature, but trust me, this thing really is good at traveling. And its size means that it's not going to get stuck on literally everything that you see in Ark. And also on top of that, it has enough melee damage and enough health to keep off any of the enemies that you may face while you are traveling from base to base. But also on top of that, this thing is actually very quick and is also a very good swimmer, which means it can pretty much traverse through any landscape. Except don't take it up cliffs or walls, because it simply can't do that. You would need something like a Thyla, a Rock Drake, etc, etc. But the Baryonyx is still really good for all of those non-hilly areas of the Ark map. And like I said, this thing is great at swimming, but it does have an ability in water as well, which means it can really fend off in the deep sea. Except you are probably going to need some scuba equipment for that, so you don't drown. Also, you can have the Baryonyx quite early on in your Ark adventure, as this thing really isn't that difficult to tame at all, and its saddle isn't unlocked at an obscenely high level. so you do have convenient travel earlier on in your arc stages. Yes, it's not going to pack the punch like a Rex, but it sure does travel a lot better than one of those, as its stamina is not abysmal and it doesn't get stuck on literally everything. And also, if you're in a PvP situation, a Baryonyx is more low profile. You are more hidden when on a Baryonyx than on something like a Rex, a Giga, or a Carcharodontosaurus, so it's a good PvP travel mount as well. In at number 4 is the Megalosaurus. Now, I would only really use this thing for travel on a map like Arboration, as this thing has so much use there, and enough people do play Arboration that I think this creature warrants being on the list for the 5 best travel mounts in Arc, as Arboration is a fan favourite of many players, so I think it does definitely deserve to get talked about. The Megalosaurus is a great creature which can really pack a punch in the fighting department, so it can get through any obstacles that you may face in Arboration. Maybe just don't put it against Microraptors, because that didn't go so well for me. But also, as you can see here, this is one of its abilities. It can hold smaller creatures in its mouth, and it will simply chomp on them until they are dead. It's essentially an upgraded bleed ability, and this is very useful if you have some little annoyances running after you and just generally annoying you. And I wouldn't put it at fault that it can easily kill alphas as well, just the alpha ran off the cliff in this case. But this thing has definitely easily been able to kill alphas for me in the past, and on Arboration it is a great creature for defeating Rockwell as well. This thing has reasonable speed and reasonable stamina, and on Arboration it is useful all the time. On other maps it is only useful in the night, as in the day this thing is as groggy as hell. So yes, overall this is mainly a travelling creature for Arboration, but it is still useful on other maps as well, just maybe not quite so much, as Arboration is underground, so it essentially works as nighttime all the time for these things, which is why these things are actually mainly used on Arboration, but I still think they deserve to get talked about, as they are very viable travel solutions before the Rock Drake. In at number 3 is the Thyla. Now this creature is definitely a lot more accessible and useful than what the Megalosaurus is. This thing has incredible speed and can tackle pretty much any landscape apart from water. Also, on top of all of that, these things have an incredible amount of damage, and these things will easily be able to kill anything in your path. And with its wealth of abilities, this thing is simply a great combat, but also in this case, travelling mount. Namely, this thing can climb up vertical walls and surfaces, which means if you see a cliff, you can simply run up it and it's no problem. With other creatures, this would be an insane inconvenience. But obviously for the Thyla, that simply isn't the case, and that's also why it is actually on this list. Also, in another ability in terms of combat, this thing has the absolutely fantastic bleed ability. So it means it will take, I think, 25% of a creature's health once the bleed ability has finalized, which means this thing can really tank through any creature, and that works no matter a creature's health. When you get into mods and creatures with millions of health, the bleed ability is literally a godsend, but I doubt many people are going to be playing GOX. Overall, the Thyla is a superb travel mount, and it definitely deserves to be on this list. It really does pack a punch, and it has a lot of speed and weight to get you around. In at number 2 is the RG. Now, I'm sure many of you agree with this creature being on the list, and I would definitely agree with that too. This is one of the travelling kings, and I think this is far superior than the Quetzal ever was, because this thing isn't actually the speed of a literal snail. Now, the Quetzal used to be the absolute beast of travelling back in the day, as you could level up its speed and that thing was insane. But the RG has simply overtaken it thanks to the flyer update, meaning that flyers can't now level up speed, unless you obviously enable flyer speed leveling in your single player settings or your server moderator supports it. But we're not back in those days of Ark, so we have to talk about Ark currently. And currently the RG is an absolute beast of travelling. It has a reasonable speed and it has a ton of weight and enough stamina so you don't have to take breaks every 5 seconds like the Pteranodon has to. Also, on top of that, if you did want to do some farming along with your travel, you can easily, as its saddle is a portable smithy, so if your metal weapons break, you can simply craft another one, and also it has weight reduction on things like metal, crystal, and obsidian. And finally, in at number 1 is the Griffin. Now, I personally think the Griffin is definitely the best travel mount in Ark. I was torn between the Wyvern and the Griffin, but the Griffin's dive bomb ability, which gives it insane speed, really just takes the cake for me. This thing is an absolutely insane travel mount. It is probably one of the fastest creatures on the Ark map. And yes, you could put a Snow Owl in the place of the Griffin, but the Griffin has a few abilities that the Snow Owl simply doesn't have, and this isn't an Ark healing creatures video. On the Griffin, you are able to wield weapons while riding, but sadly on the Snow Owl you can't, which is why I have put it above the Snow Owl on this list. In fact, the Snow Owl didn't even make it onto the list. But also that dive bomb ability is very useful in so many different ways. It's not just an ability that gives you insane speed to travel across the map. It is also a great source of dealing damage and a great way to surprise the enemy in any kind of PvP situation. In this demonstration, I'm showing you me killing a Bronto, and in a moment I am going to dive bomb the hell out of it. And in about 30 seconds, this thing is very easily dead. And you can use this ability on any creature you want. It is a lot easier on larger creatures though, as if you're trying to hit a dodo with this dive bomb ability from that height, you're going to need to have very good accuracy. But also, another great use of the Griffin is raiding Wyvern trenches, as these things have incredible speed, so you can quickly grab an egg and get out really quickly, which means on your travels, if you want to get a Wyvern, you can simply grab one and keep on going. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Did you agree with this list? If not, comment your top 5 below, and I will see you all later. Bye.